News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
(9:30), Monday the 15th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
Tory wipeout. The Conservatives are facing a 1997-style election defeat. A major poll today suggests Labour would sweep into power with a huge majority. Have you turned your back on the Conservatives? This morning, we want to hear from you. Why?
And left at the mercy of the grooming gangs. Breaking the last hour, Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, said the police failed to protect young girls. Let's have a listen.
Over many years, Greater Manchester Police failed to give the investigation of these serious crimes the priority and resources necessary.
And get tough on Rwanda. Conservative MPs demand that the Prime Minister toughens up the Rwanda bill. Today, many high-profile MPs are threatening to resign.
And show of force, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is going to commit 20,000 British troops in a NATO exercise biggest in 40 years. He's speaking at Lancaster House. GB News spoke with him earlier.
This will be the biggest deployment of UK troops to NATO for about 40 years. This is an operation which is designed to essentially allow NATO to test our approach.
And our late Queen's fury. Bombshell revelations in a new book reveal that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth was infuriated by Harry and Meghan's claim that she'd given her blessing to their daughter being named Lilibet. We'll have the details. Lots to talk about this morning.
That poll is massive, isn't it? Front of the Telegraph, the Tory graph. It's 14,000 people have been polled, so it's not your average routine monthly poll. The biggest of its kind in years and years, and it says Labour are heading for a massive landslide victory. Fascinating about Reform UK. We want to know, if you're one of those who've abandoned the Tories, tell us why.
Yeah, absolutely. That and a lot more this morning. First, though, here's the very latest news with Sophia.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 9:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The UK will send 20,000 troops across Europe as Britain looks to counter an alarming rise in Russian aggression. It'll include deployments from the Army, the Navy and the RAF in what's being described as the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. The drill, which involves 31 nations, will see troops preparing for the invasion of a NATO member state by any aggressor. The Prime Minister will speak to MPs later after a series of strikes were launched against targets in Yemen without consulting Parliament. It will be Rishi Sunak's first-time address since the UK joined the US in targeting the Houthi rebels. The Foreign Secretary says the decision not to consult Parliament was important for reasons of operational security. Girls were left at the mercy of paedophile grooming gangs due to failings by senior police and council leaders. That's according to a comprehensive new report covering nearly 10 years of failed investigations by Greater Manchester Police. It highlights years of widespread organised sexual abuse of children in the Rochdale area, despite what it described as compelling evidence reported to authorities as early as 2004. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, apologised for the system's failings and said a culture change was needed to protect children. And a volcano that erupted yesterday in Iceland is sending lava flowing into nearby villages, covering houses. A fountain of molten rock and smoke spewed into the sky early on Sunday, the second eruption in the country's southwest in less than a month. Iceland's Prime Minister, Katrín Jakobsdóttir, says it's a very dangerous situation.
Around noon we had a new shock when a fissure opened within the town and there is lava flowing up from that fissure. Already several houses have gone under lava, so it's a very serious situation we're faced with here right now.
And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning to you. 9:34, Monday morning. It's supposed to be Blue Monday, which means it's the saddest day of the year. Are we feeling sad?
We're both wearing blue, but not because we're feeling very... Apparently it's Blue Monday because it's January the 15th, we've got no money, it's post-Christmas.
Nothing to look forward
weather's
to.
Bad.
Feels grim.
And if you are Rishi Sunak today, and if you're one of 11 cabinet ministers, you'll be feeling it's Blue Monday because a poll on the front of the Telegraph today is quite extraordinary. A 1997-style wipeout. And remember, go back in history, Tories have been in power for 18 years. Mrs Thatcher was ousted, John Major won a surprising election in 92. Come 97, they paid for it. Blair had the biggest majority in modern history, 179. This poll is suggesting that Keir Starmer will win with 120 seats. The Tories will be down from about 360 that they've got now, down to 169. Massacre.
Massacre. And, of course, the Telegraph front is a YouGov poll. As Andrew says, it's not some poxy little thing done by, you know, somebody with a vested interest, with the big picture of Rishi Sunak on the front page, which it kind of draws attention to the fact that perhaps I think it's his personal lack of popularity, which is a problem here. But we really want to hear from you at home. If you would traditionally have voted for the Conservative Party and you are not going to do so this year, why? Give me the detail. Let us know why. Is it about immigration? Is it about the economy? Is it about the fact that we're continuing to spend a lot of money on foreign wars that perhaps you feel we should not be doing, which is going to bring us on to Grant Shapps as well, talking this morning, telling us quite what our commitment is going to be. What is it that is infuriating you so much?
And a lot of people we know watch this programme and listen to this station are saying they're going to vote for Reform UK. That's Richard Tice's party. Nigel Farage, of course, is the eminence Greece, of course, and he hasn't told us yet whether he's going to run, although one poll suggested he would comfortably win Clacton in Essex, where there's a huge issue with migration. But this poll changes everything because it says if Reform UK weren't standing, it would be a hung parliament with Labour being the largest party.
Yeah.
But with Reform standing, Tory voters are going to abandon the Tories, vote Reform, and that's when you get a landslide majority of 120. And here's the thing, not a single Reform Party member would win a seat in this poll. So the question will be, the Tories are going to hit you hard with this. You vote Reform, you're going to get a landslide Labour government. Is that what you really want?
That's what Labour...
That's what the Tories will say.
Well, they will vote. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Reform...
And it suits Labour.
Correct. Reform would be the deciding factor in 96 Tory lost seats. But if Richard Tice or Ben Habib were here, they would say, but we are going to raise awareness of our party before this election. If this poll is done now, some people will not know who we are, they will not know what we represent. Perhaps we will win the odd seat. Can they make such a swing? Remains to be seen. What do you think at home?
And how much more significant would this poll be if Nigel Farage was leading reform, with all respect to Richard Tice? Nigel Farage is the household name. Nigel Farage was the one who did brilliantly in the jungle. Nigel Farage of this parish, of course. One of the most popular programmes on the station. I'm a huge admirer of Nigel's, as are you, Bev. And I still think he's one of the most significant politicians of the last 30, 40 years, because he got us the referendum, we got Brexit done, we got Brexit, and the Tories, in my view, have surrendered some of the benefits of Brexit. They just haven't delivered what we expected.
Yeah, absolutely. So gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address that we want to hear from you this morning about this topic.
The Cabinet Ministers will lose the seat. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, is out. Penny Mordaunt, remember, she's seen by many as a future Tory leader. She's the one who got all that publicity because she held the sword for an hour at the coronation, the Leader of the Commons. She'd be out. She's got a majority of about 12,000. The Attorney General is out.
Damning.
The
Grant Shapps, who we're going to hear from this morning, he will be out. Gillian Keegan, Education,
Secretary,
out.
that's in Chichester.
Simon Hart.
Welsh, he's the Chief Whip.
Out. Johnny Mercer.
Yeah. The Welsh Secretary's out. Andrew Davis.
Yep. John Redwood,
David
Lucy
Davis.
Fraser, and GB News' very own Lee Anderson would also be out, according to this poll. Do you think, Andrew, that they will all stick around to fight their seats? So these high-profile ones will as well, but I think there's a sense, isn't there? There's a lot of Conservative MPs are going before the election.
Jeremy Hunt is definitely going to carry on, even though I've spoken to his people quite a lot about this. So he's got a Liberal Democrat challenge. He used to have a majority of about 28,000 down in Surrey. It's now down to about 9,000. There have been boundary changes. They cut his constituency in half, and he's got the wrong half. So he will have to stay, because if the Chancellor stood down just for an election, what would that look like? Ian Duncan-Smith, of course, who's very often on this station, he's a backbencher now. He's got a majority of about 1,500. He'll be swept away. Swept away. And of course, Penny Mordaunt fancies her chances as the next leader.
And do you still... I know Rishi Sunak did say we're aiming for an election in the second half of the year. I've always thought it would be autumn because I don't think there's going to be enough good news for the Conservatives by May. But you're still not convinced, are you?
It's still a possibility, in my view. Just say the Tories won in May, won the London mayoral election. Because Sadiq Khan is not popular. That's an understatement. He's awful, ghastly. ULEZ, the extension of the ultra-low emission zone, really unpopular. If the Tories manage to win that, particularly if there's an independent Labour candidate, that would be a huge launchpad for a snap election in June. Or they could go in May. I think the worry Rishi's got, and I'd be Cam's to talk to him about this, what if they haven't sorted the boats? What if the planes haven't taken off to Rwanda? Our boat's going to be pouring across the channel throughout the summer. How weak does that make him look?
And that obviously is going to be one of the big talking points for tomorrow. And tomorrow, of course, is where this bill is going to be back in Parliament with two sides of the Conservative Party. One saying it's too soft. There are too many ways in which appeals can be made for those who are going to be sent home from Rwanda. And there are those saying it's not hard enough. It's not hard enough.
And he's caught in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interesting week.
Kemi Badenoch, who is the business secretary, international business secretary, it's been leaked that she went to see the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff to say it's got to be toughened up, the bill. Who leaked that then? Could that be somebody close to Kemi Badenoch to try and show that she's tough and hard and thinking of potentially a leadership contest post the general election? Am I being too cynical?
No such thing as too cynical, I'm afraid. The other sort of story we're going to be discussing... we're just looking here. This is Lancaster House. This is where Grant Shapps is going to make a speech this morning to talk about our position on the world stage.
But I think people are very excited about
the
Rochdale grooming situation, don't you? Andy Burnham commissioned that report, which effectively hangs out the police and the system to dry for letting down those girls.
Very much.
Mainly white girls, weren't they?
That's right. I've been watching it live this morning from Greater Manchester Police's Facebook feed. It's a big day for Maggie Oliver. A lot of you will be familiar with Maggie. She runs the Maggie Oliver Foundation, and this is about the grooming gangs between 2004 2013, and the sense that there's still no justice. Maggie was just saying there's still no justice for some of these young women now, of course, as they were girls at the time. We're going to be having Charlie Peters in the studio. He's going to be telling us exactly what was said this morning, exactly what that might mean for the victims, for the survivors and for the protagonists who were covering up the issue.
And a suggestion that some of the men who were a threat to these girls are still at loose in the community, have not been pulled in. And we know what the problem was. The mainly white police force up there and the mainly white social service up there treaded too carefully, too sensitively because of the racial issues, because the majority of the offenders were men of Pakistani origin. Well, it doesn't matter what colour they are. If they are attacking on a systematic way and using girls as playthings, which is what was happening. Some of these girls were abused by 30 different men.
It was the idea that political correctness trumped the sense of justice, and that these were poor white girls.
Nobody cared about them.
Nobody cared about them, from chaotic backgrounds and difficult families and school, you know, in and out of school.
And there's a pattern here. Remember Jimmy Savile, how he picked his victims very carefully. They were often in children's homes, broken homes, and even if they did complain, nobody paid any attention to them. Oh, not her. No, maybe only a single parent. I mean, these men in the grooming gangs were very cynically targeting girls who they thought they could get away with. And they did get away with it for years and years and years. It's shaming.
And then the police seemed to just dismiss them because they were the poor kids that might be known in the community. Oh, we know what she's like. I mean, even the suggestion that some of these young girls were somehow complicit in their sexual abuse and their rape, that they were somehow leading these men on or in some way enjoying the experience. It's absolutely disgusting.
Plied with alcohol, plied with drugs, and passed around like rag dolls.
You know, the statements which we've been hearing this morning, as I say, we will bring them to you a little later in the show, are really incredibly damning. But I do hope it goes far enough, and I do hope that people are held to account. And in fact, one of the speakers this morning, I think it was Sarah Rowbotham, who worked with Maggie Oliver, a former police officer, and she was saying it shouldn't take a documentary or a drama to bring these issues to the fore.
Because yet again, there was a TV drama about
these three girls.
These three girls. Yeah, and that was... Look, we saw it with the Post Office, we've seen it with this, we're going to see it with other issues. I mean, why does it take a TV drama to galvanise the system, the state, the government, whoever it is, to do the right thing?
And talking of drama, thank you for staying with us. We're waiting for Grant Shapps. He's going to be talking in a minute. Is this drama this morning as well? We're going to be getting to this later on in the show. So, your favourite person, Andrew, Meghan. This is a bit of a revelation, isn't it? This is the royal correspondent from the Mail.
Yeah, Robert's written a book. Robert is so well plugged in. Robert Hardman is so well plugged in. He knows senior royals in a way that they wouldn't even look at me. You know, when I did the royal bit, I never had the access. He's got unrivalled access. We were all amazed that Harry and Meghan called their daughter Lilibet. That was the childhood name of Queen Elizabeth II. She couldn't pronounce her own name, Elizabeth, so Mum and Dad called her Lilibet. Princess Margaret called her Lilibet, so did Prince Philip. It was a name just for the chosen few.
Yeah.
Not only did they call her Lilibet, but Harry and Meghan told us the Queen had given her approval, and when it was suggested she hadn't, legal threats were being bandied around by Harry and Meghan as per usual.
Yeah.
This book says definitively not so. Do we recall that expression? Recollections may vary.
Yeah, I mean, you're thinking, why would that have upset the Queen so much? Because when you're so public and your identity is on the global stage, you're one of the most recognised people in the world. You have very little that you can claim as your own, I imagine, from an identity point of view. And for her, it was this nickname of Lilibet. And as you say, I think her parents, her grandparents...
Her sister.
Her sister, that's right, Princess Margaret, and
one or two
other people were allowed to call her Lilibet. Otherwise, it would have been... I mean, this is a woman who her grandchildren would genuflect to her when they walk in the room. Her grandchildren would curtsy. And then to the idea that these two took that name and they stole it from her, and put it in the public eye, and also she couldn't say anything.
No.
She couldn't say, I don't want you to use that name, because that would cast her as being mean.
And Robert, in his book, Robert Hardman's book, says that palace aides had never seen the late Queen so angry.
Had never seen her as angry as she was. And it wasn't necessarily when she knew that the daughter was called Lilibet, but it was when the Sussexes said that the Queen had given the name her blessing. That was what incensed her.
And they said if anybody suggests otherwise, they will sue for defamation. You know what? They never did sue for defamation. Legal letters won't fly. I'm sorry, it shows that Meghan and Harry don't tell it straight.
Yeah. Well, I think they have sort of their own version.
And at the weekend, we know that the idea that Harry did not get a call from William about the death of the Queen, not true, according to this book. And I believe Robert. I'd rather believe Robert Harper than I would Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking this morning. We're waiting for Grant Shapps to come on and tell us how much money we're going to spend on the global stage getting involved in wars that some might say aren't necessarily our business, but that's just me.
Don't forget, last week we had Rishi Sunak in Ukraine pledging another £2.5 billion. The money that won't be spent till later in the year, when it might even be that the Tories aren't in power.
But what I think annoys me particularly about the Ukraine money is the lack of auditing on where that money is going to. And it doesn't feel like, as British people, we've had much of a say into whether we should be spending all of that money over there.
Ukraine is a chaotic place and a chaotic government.
And always was.
Yeah.
Before, you know, I know that when Putin horrifically started bombing the east of Ukraine, I'm not condoning that in any way, shape or form, but up until that point, the Ukraine government was known as one of the most corrupt in the world, and suddenly they were cast as saintly on the global stage, and we opened our doors to people from Ukraine, which was a wonderful thing to do, but we also opened our checkbook and we continue to write cheques. And you wonder, we're talking this morning about this lack of popularity with the Conservatives. Does this play into it for you? Is that part of the problem? You feel like we've got potholes that can't be fixed, we've got bins that don't get emptied.
Trains don't work.
The trains don't work, and yet it feels like we have this never-ending bank account when it comes to dishing out money to military action around the world. Peter Hitchens was writing about this at the weekend.
He was.
And he wrote a brilliant piece saying that actually we're still sort of labouring under the illusion that we are a big player on the global stage when it comes to these sorts of events, and we need to get our own house in order before we start spending more and more hundreds of billions.
And also, of course,
war.
we were also involved in the military action against the Houthis. I mean, I think we were doing the right thing there, because the principle of free navigation has to be defended and protected.
Yeah.
And it's British merchant shipping they're attacking as well. But again, it could drag us closer potentially to a conflict with Iran, who are funding the Houthis. I mean, that's where the Houthis are getting their missiles from. That's
Absolutely.
Why they're not some ragbag load of... I mean, they are funded by one of the most oppressive countries on the planet who've got plenty of money.
That's right. So what will Grant Shapps say this morning? We're going to be going live to him in just a moment to find out what we will be spending on that particular issue. That has worried me. The Red Sea altercation, as soon as that sort of was about 6 weeks ago now, maybe not even quite that long, I thought this has the potential to completely destabilise the Middle East. Of course, it is tied to events in Gaza and Israel.
And, of course, the Houthis say they're targeting only ships connected to Israel, but that's a lie. They're targeting any ship that's going through that strait. It's where 12% of world trade goes through that narrow strait of waterway, which means it's going to have an impact on inflation, it's going to have an impact on gas prices, oil prices. But it's more than just that. It's about the fact we've got to protect the right to navigation. Now, we're told, hold your breath here, that the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, who could well lose his seat, he's arrived... I think is he speaking in Lancaster House?
It is Lancaster House, yeah. Here he is. Here's Grant.
Gave a short speech here at Lancaster House. She spoke of her optimism about the changes taking place between East and West. Barely 2 weeks later, the Berlin Wall fell. It was the dawn of a new era. Existential threats were banished, and a new global feel-good factor for defence had begun. This was the age of the peace dividend. The notion that while our defences should be maximised at times of tension, they could be minimised in times of peace. Now, conflict didn't disappear, of course, but with no great power menacing the world, peace gave the impression of being just around the corner. Yet, not everybody got the memo. In fact, our adversaries were mobilising. The belligerent autocratic state was making a comeback. Having got away with his illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014, an emboldened Putin launched his brutal invasion of Ukraine 8 years later. And as Russia continues its illegal campaign in Ukraine, China is assessing whether the West loses its patience. Today, Russia and China have been joined by new nuclear and soon-to-be nuclear powers. North Korea, promising to expand its own nuclear arsenal. And then there is Iran, whose enriched uranium is up to 83.7%, a level at which there is no civilian. Back in the days of the Cold War, there remained a sense that we were dealing with rational actors. But these new powers are far more unstable, irrational. Can we really assume that the strategy of mutually assured destruction that stopped wars in the past will stop them in the future when applied to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard or North Korea? I am afraid we cannot. Particularly since there is now another new worrying consideration. Our adversaries are more connected with each other. For example, we've seen how Iranian proxies are causing havoc from Israel to the Red Sea. That Russia has what the two countries describe as a no-limits partnership with China, with whom they conduct regular joint exercises. Meanwhile, Putin is relying on Iranian drones and North Korean ballistic missiles to fuel his illegal bombardment in Ukraine. With friends like these, the world is becoming more dangerous and has done in recent years. But the other threats that plagued us at the start of the 21st century, well, they haven't gone away either. The spectre of terrorism and threats from non-state actors, as October the 7th showed, still haunts the civilized world. Put it all together, and these combined threats risk tearing apart the rules-based international order established to keep the peace after the Second World War. Today's world, then, is sadly far more dangerous, with the UN reporting that we are facing the highest number of violent conflicts since the Second World War. Now, some argue these threats are not existential to the UK, and yet what happens elsewhere quickly happens here. In the past few years, we've seen terrorist attacks on the streets of London, attempted assassinations in Salisbury, theft of intellectual property, attempted interference in our political processes, a cost of living crisis brought to you by Putin that's hurting families here at home. And now, our trade, 90% of which comes by sea, is the target of terrorists, proving that not only do our adversaries have the intent to target us, but they have a widening array of weapons with which to wreak havoc. In our online world, our adversaries don't need to fire a missile or board a submarine or strap into a fighter jet to hurt us. Cyber warfare simply means hacking into our networks and watching the economic carnage unfold. Last year, almost a third of British businesses suffered a cyber attack or breach. And the total cost to the UK economy, well, that runs into billions. We know a significant number of those attacks come from Russia and China, where they're also developing satellite killing technology capable of degrading us from space. Even mass migration can be cynically used as a weapon of war, as Poland, Norway, and Finland have been experiencing. In other words, nation-states plus non-state actors with greater connections between them, plus more creative weapons, all adds up to a much more troubled world. And over the last decade, this government has made great strides in turning around that defence tanker. The refreshers of the Integrated Review and the Defence Command Paper have been instrumental in ensuring that Britain is defended in this more dangerous world. We've uplifted our defence spending, investing billions into modernising our armed forces and bringing in a raft of next-generation capabilities, from our new aircraft carriers to F-35s, from new drones to the Dreadnought submarine programme, from better trained troops to the creation of a national cyber force. When the world has needed us, we have risen to the moment, giving Ukraine unwavering support and galvanising others to their cause, including with our biggest ever funding package, announced just last week. Taking action, we've worked to stamp out the global ambitions of Daesh. We've acted on the forefront of the global response to maintaining regional stability after October the 7th by sending a Royal Navy task force group, a company of Royal Marines, surveillance planes, and life-saving aid to Gaza. And taking a lead role within the global forces to protect freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. Not only that, but we've also strengthened Britain's place in the world with expanded partnerships from the Gulf to the Indo-Pacific. We're playing a major part in stirring the West into a renewed commitment to defence, using our 2014 NATO summit in Newport to bring the alliance nations together to stop the rot, by committing to spending 2% of GDP on defence. And today, for the very first time, the government is spending more than £50 billion a year on defence, in cash terms, more than ever before. And we've made the critical decision to set out our aspiration to reach 2.5% of GDP on defence, and as we stabilise and grow this economy, we'll continue to strive to reach that as soon as possible. But now is the time for all allied and democratic nations across the world to do the same thing and ensure their defence spending is growing too. Because, as discussed, the era of the peace dividend is over. In 5 years' time, we could be looking at multiple theatres, including Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Ask yourself, looking at today's conflicts across the world, is it more likely that that number grows or reduces? I suspect we all know the answer. It's likely to grow. So 2024 must mark an inflection point. For Ukraine, this will be a year when the fate of their nation may well be decided. For the world, this will be the greatest democratic year in history, with nearly half of the world's population actually going to the polls. And for the UK, it must also be a moment to decide the future of our national defences. The choice is stark. Some people, especially on the left, have a tendency to talk Britain down. They believe Britain can no longer have the power to influence world events, that we should somehow shrink into ourselves and ignore what's happening beyond our shores. I passionately believe these unpatriotic, Britain-belittling doommongers are simply wrong. Their way would lead us sailing blindly into an age of autocracy. So we must make a different choice. And the history of our great island nation actually shows us the way. Britain has often accomplished the seemingly impossible before. Our history is littered with moments when we faced down the threat and we have triumphed. But looking ahead, we are in a new era, and we must be prepared to deter our enemies, to lead our allies, and defend our nation. In terms of deterrence, it's about the UK gaining a strategic advantage over our enemies. The foundation of that advantage is, of course, our nuclear enterprise. At a time of mounting nuclear danger, our continuous at-sea deterrent provides the ultimate protection. And that's why we're spending around £31 billion to bring in the next generation dreadnought submarines and upgrade our deterrent. In a more contested world, we need to bring the same goal of deterrence to our conventional forces. So we've made modernisation a critical priority, taking the long-term compatibility decisions that we need to transform our armed forces into a formidable deterrent, enabling them to maintain the UK's strategic advantage, empowering them to be able to deliver the outcomes we need in multiple theatres at once. The growing success of that world was powerfully shown last week when, in less than 24 hours, the United Kingdom was able to both take action to defend ourselves against the Houthis and uplift support to Ukraine to new record levels. If Putin thought that we would be distracted by events in the Middle East than last week because of the long-term decisions this government has taken, his hopes were surely dashed. In a complex world, no nation can afford to go it alone, so we must continue to strengthen our alliances so the world knows they cannot be broken. Defence is in many ways the cornerstone of our relations across the globe. Our world-leading armed forces, cutting-edge industrial base, willingness to support our allies is the reason why Britain is the partner of choice for so many. And amongst our partnerships, NATO remains preeminent. 75 years after its foundation, today's NATO is bigger than ever. But the challenges, and that's why the UK has committed nearly the totality of our air, land and maritime assets to NATO. But in 2024, I'm determined to do even more. And that's why I can announce today the UK will be sending some 20,000 personnel to lead one of NATO's largest deployments since the end of the Cold War. Exercise Steadfast Defender. It will see our military joining forces with counterparts from 30 NATO countries, plus Sweden, providing reassurance against the Putin menace. Our carrier strike group will be out in full force with our magnificent flagship HMS Queen Elizabeth leading the way. And flying from her decks will be the 5th generation F-35 Lightning jets, accompanied by a fearsome phalanx of frigates, destroyers and helicopters. We'll also have a submarine patrolling the depths and one of our Poseidon P-8 conducting surveillance from the skies above. And more than 400 of our brilliant Royal Marines will be training in the Arctic Circle, contending with some of the toughest environments anywhere on the planet. On land, we'll be deploying over 16,000 light merchant mechanized brigade combat team from the 7th Light Infantry, which superbly led our recent response in Kosovo. All of which makes this our largest deployment of land forces to NATO in 40 years. But NATO is only part of our rich tapestry of partnerships. And this government has taken bold decisions to embark on the partnerships we need to defend ourselves from a more dangerous world. We're rapidly building our AUKUS partnership. And last month, I signed a Global Combat Air Partnership, or GCAP, with Japan and Italy. These projects are not just about building nuclear-powered subs, 6th-generation fighter planes and innovating in all forms of defence. They're about sharpening our strategic edge so we can maintain our advantage over our adversaries. They are precisely the deep relationships needed to preserve national and regional security. And they're emblematic of the way that we will work in the future. But it's not enough to simply deter. We must also lead. standing up for our values around the world, and Ukraine is a test case. This year, its future may well be decided. Valiant Ukrainian warriors have been incredible, successful in pushing back invading Russian forces, retaking 50% of the territory stolen by Russia, opening up.
That's the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps who's still talking, but we have in our studio, we have an expert panel, Sarah Vine, of course, my colleague from the Mail, and Mark White, I'm security editor. Sarah Vine, who's listening to this?
I don't think anyone's listening to it. I mean, his oratory skills are not fabulous. I mean, I think he needed to make a statement, but he could have just made a quick statement and then gone. It's like he's making some kind of prime ministerial pitch, doesn't it?
As I'm looking, I keep thinking, yeah, but you're going to lose your seat, mate, because if you look at that poll in the front of the Telegraph today, 11 cabinet ministers will lose their seats, including.
I mean, I think
Grant
that poll is
Shapps.
quite interesting. I think it's a useful poll because I think it will galvanise Conservative grassroots campaigners and stuff. I suspect that's partly why it's in the Telegraph.
Yeah.
I think the Tories will, if they've got any sense, they'll just say, you know, vote Reform, get Labour.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen because Reform will split the Conservative vote.
Because if you look at the poll, if there's no Reform candidate standing, it's a hung Parliament. If Reform stand,
it's a landslide for Labour.
Majority 120, biggest majority since Blair in 97.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, amazing. And so people need to, you know, that will be the Tories. I should imagine that'll be their line now. Vote Reform, get Labour.
Yeah. Let's bring in Mark White, because we have just been listening to Grant Shapps drone on about our role on the global stage. Did he have anything of particular note to say there, Mark?
Listen, I find what he was saying interesting because he's highlighting some of the global challenges that we have in the new world environment, but nothing that's really new, except for the announcement of the commitment of 20,000 British personnel to this huge NATO exercise to mark the 75th anniversary.
Just let me just clarify that. So he's not talking about sending out troops to defend anybody, but just to send them out to have a little exercise, a bit of a drill, 20,000 soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, I think members of the armed forces would probably take, exception to the fact that there's a little exercise. These things are vital, of course, to honing the skills for working together to face real-life events. But I think that the difficulty here is that we've got this announcement of 20,000 troops with great fanfare, talking about the marvellous aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth and our F-35s. Yet we're facing currently a real-world crisis in the Red Sea, where the Americans have sent, quite understandably, their battle group USS Eisenhower, that's played a pivotal role in the strikes in Yemen. Whether you think these strikes were a good idea or not, it's happening. We sent 4 RAF Typhoons from Cyprus on a 3,000-mile-plus round trip to Yemen because we don't have the capability with the naval assets that are down there for land strikes. We don't have Tomahawk cruise missiles on our frigates or destroyers, for instance. We have them on the submarines. We haven't sent a submarine.
Right.
We have, with the aircraft carrier, our F-35s, few in number, about 30 or so, and half of them are involved in training. But we still have about 10, 15, potentially, that we could deploy in an aircraft carrier down there as part of this. If it makes sense for the Americans to go close to Yemen to launch their strikes, it would surely make sense for the UK to do it. However, there's all kinds of stories that have come out that the Grant Shapps and his team have been quick to try to deny that we can't send the carrier because of a recruitment crisis in the Navy. Support ships are unable to support HMS Queen Elizabeth. Interestingly, one more, I know I'm packing a lot in here, but the Defence Procurement Minister, speaking to Camilla Tominey yesterday, said, no, they're both there, they're both at readiness, that's HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Prince of Wales, ready to be sent should the decision be taken. Well, why has the decision not been taken? This has been boiling on for weeks now, the threat that if Yemen persists in doing what it will do, then we're going to strike back. So it's persisted. We haven't sent any kind of carrier capability down there, and we're sending 4 typhoons from Cyprus in a 3,000-mile plus trip.
Sarah, I mean, again, I just go back to this poll. I mean, that we're strutting our stuff on the international stage, very important military exercise, of course, but I mean, it just feels when I read this poll, we're in the end game for the Conservatives.
Yeah, I mean, the election is going to be probably November, we think, and, you know, so they're obviously trying to galvanise themselves in anticipation of that. But, I mean, I've said this before, you know, on this programme, you know, the Conservatives could find a cure for cancer and no one would vote for them at the stage they're at.
Because people make their mind.
They're just so unpopular, and that's the problem. And it's not necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily a rational thing, but it's definitely just a visceral thing. People are just cross and they've had enough, and all the sort of chopping and changing of leaders and the sort of various scandals and everything. People are just worn out by them.
If they'd stayed with Boris, do you think they'd be in a better place?
I mean, I think yes, I think sometimes you just have to stick with the plan even when the plan gets tough. And I think it's that sort of it's that running away from the focus that's really got them into so much trouble.
I mean, whatever you think about it, he's a formidable campaigner, and I'm not sure that Rishi is.
When we look at what our viewers at home have been saying, Andrew, as well, I mean, this Sarah, Bob says, for the first time in my voting life, I'm now 63, I won't be voting Conservative. The reason is simple. Sunak isn't a man of the people. He is just too out of touch to deal with the lives of real people. Despite it probably being a wasted vote, I'll be voting for reform. So many people saying that and pointing the finger at Sunak
But
himself.
this is the thing, you know, this gentleman knows that his vote will be wasted if he votes for
but he's still going to do it.
But he doesn't care because he's so annoyed, and that's the difficulty that they've got. Is that people are not stupid. They understand what will happen if they vote reform. They understand that there will be a Labour landslide, but they're just sort of at the stage where they just think, I'm sorry, guys, enough is enough.
They want to make their voice heard.
Do you think it's the economy, immigration, both?
I think it's
been around too long.
I think it's a combination of factors. I think we have to say that they had a tough time with COVID, obviously, and sort of picking up the sort of what was left after Brexit went so sort of horribly wrong. But I think that they've had two quite difficult, you know, really major things. But as politics is like comedy, it's all about timing, and you know they've had some rotten luck, but they haven't really handled it as well as they could have done. And I think, and going back to what you were saying before about Johnson, I think you just have to stick to your guy, you know, and you have to just push through and you know stick to the plan. Instead of which all this chopping and changing is just, I think people just don't. They don't have any confidence in any of them. They don't know who half the cabinet is anymore.
Laurie at home has said, I'm over 70. I've always voted Conservative. Not now. They are not Conservatives. They've become useless woke socialists who've lost sight of right versus wrong and swing from one fear-driven, unthought-through idea to another. I would vote for Reform or Nigel. And Peter has said, my wife and I will be voting Reform because we are Conservatives. Our hope is that Nigel will take the lead and some prominent real Conservatives will move to Reform and form a proper right-of-centre party. We need reform policies on energy and immigration, net zero immigration, not net zero. Do you think we will see any Conservative MPs across to Reform? Nigel, Richard Tice seems to think that they will.
I mean, I think the thing is, it's a lovely idea, and you could see why they would want to do it, but the reality is they won't get a seat. So, and a lot of, politicians, if you're not in Parliament, you have no agency. So it's a kind of it's tough talk.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, people want to be elected so that they can do their jobs, and that's not going to happen with Reform, I don't think.
No.
I think Reform is just going to be like the Lib Dems used to be. They're just going to fracture the vote, and I doubt very much whether they will take actual many seats.
But of course, they would say our plan is a 10-year plan. It isn't just for this election. What we're looking for is the next election, and would there be Conservative MPs who would deflect now?
This has to be their year, because this is the year Nigel's done the jungle. Nigel's at the peak of his popularity, and he's still teasing us, isn't he, or isn't he? I think
he needs to get on with it or get on.
Yeah, and there's a seating they've identified. This poll identifies seating Clacton in Essex, which they say he would win.
Yeah, I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would definitely win that.
But then, is he going to be one Reform MP in Parliament?
There might be 5 Reform MPs, for example. They're not going to be.
That's pretty lonely.
I think so, and difficult. And the thing is that what you're getting from all of your viewers is this idea that this Conservative administration is not a proper Conservative administration. What they've tried to do is they've tried to appeal to the middle ground, and they've tried to go for a sort of more centrist approach. The problem is that with that is that you know, the people you're chasing, who are basically sort of Times readers, Guardian readers, they're never going to vote Conservative. They're always going to vote Lib Dem or Labour. So you're giving away a lot of your political capital in pursuit of something that's not probably going to actually come through for you.
Do you, Mark, we're just listening to Grant Shapps, who is still talking, apparently. Do you feel that you, in your role here as our Home and Security Editor, have got a clear view of what Labour would offer in terms of our defence strategy?
Well, in terms of the defence strategy, yes, they say that they are going to invest significantly in the defence. They've not really come up with the numbers, but remember, it was under a Labour government that they actually commissioned the aircraft carriers, the HMS Queen Elizabeth and Prince of Wales. That was a Labour government that gave the go-ahead for that massive commitment of £7 billion. Under Tony Blair's, yeah.
But he was very
He
hawkish,
wasn't really a Labour government,
He was very hawkish.
He was rather, yes.
And to take us into a war in Iraq that a lot of us don't actually agree with. Yeah.
Yeah, he was very much about, again, a little bit about appearing to be powerful on the global stage. But I don't know where I don't know what Keir Starmer's position would be on a lot of these issues, do you?
What he's going to do about immigration, which is the great issue, which is infuriating so many people ringing in and...
Well, of course, Tony Blair is the genesis of our immigration problem.
Yes, of course. He said, come on in.
All our problems, in my opinion.
Flooded him under Blair.
We had a tragedy over the weekend, Mark, didn't we, with the migrant crossings of 5 people trying to cross over lost their lives.
Yeah. We had our first, on Saturday actually, the first crossings of the year, and indeed the first crossing since the 16th of December, so just almost a month because of horrific weather conditions. Whatever the government says about what it's doing to stop...
Rwanda, then?
No, listen, anybody that knows anything about the maritime operations in the English Channel know that you just couldn't push the small boats out with the wind... In particular, the wind conditions in the Channel over the last month, they were just over 10 to 12 knots, which it's impassable for these flimsy inflatables. But the second it drops below that, then what happens? Inevitably, as sure as night follows day, you get the people smugglers pushing these boats out. However, they were doing it over the weekend when, although the weather conditions improved, they didn't improve to the point where it was flat, calm and ideal for putting these boats... Not that it's ever ideal for putting these flimsy things out, but at least flat, calm conditions. They were still putting them out in rough, choppy conditions. There were multiple rescues that took place on the French side of the Channel, and this incident in which a number of migrants had tried. What they do is they push the boat out into the water, then everybody rushes into the water to scramble to get on board. A few didn't make it. They were left flailing around in the freezing cold water after 1 in the morning. The rescue services attended, but 5 people died. 1 person taken to hospital under cardiac arrest.
So not far from the shore, then?
It was Wimereux, which was way down, actually, in Boulogne, and it just shows you how far the people smugglers are pushing these small boats off along a huge stretch, more than 70 miles of stretch, you know, from Dunkirk, down Calais, down to Boulogne, to try to evade whatever we might say about the French and their ability to stop.
French
well,
response.
to be fair to them, it's a big old stretch of coastline. They have increased their security. They are making a bit of a difference in making the people smugglers go over a longer distance, and that perhaps has led to a bit of a reduction. But I think most of the reduction in the numbers who crossed over the last year is down to the fact we've had a year of pretty rotten weather in the Channel.
Just briefly, Sarah, before we go to break, Cameron was doing the broadcast running yesterday, David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, and he said this shows why we've got to get the Rwanda planes up in the air.
Yeah, I mean, do any of these people know about the Rwanda project? I mean...
it's a joke for them. I was across in Calais just before Christmas there, speaking to migrants in the camps there, and they told me that it's a standing joke. When it was first announced in April of 2022, there was some real concern. People say, what does this mean for us, you know? And then there was a possible deterrent. Almost 2 years on, nobody thinks it's ever going to happen.
It's not
the deterrent, even if it's no. Right, Sarah and Mark, thank you so much. Still to come this morning, do all scandals need a TV series before anything happens? It feels like it, doesn't it? Before the Post Office saga, it was the BBC drama 3 Girls, which has inspired Andy Burnham's independent review into the Rochdale grooming gangs. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're with Britain's News when GB News' Andrew Pearson Bertoni. It is 10:24 now. The report to grooming gangs in Rochdale has been made public today. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, spoke to the press earlier.
The report being published today finds unequivocally that failures that could and should have been avoided were in fact repeated. In the words of the report, it represents a, quote, lamentable strategic failure by leaders in the Greater Manchester system at the time. Over many years, Greater Manchester Police failed to give the investigation of these serious crimes the priority and resources necessary.
Well, joining us now is our reporter Charlie Peters from Manchester. Good morning, Charlie. I watched as much of this as I could this morning. Some of it was very emotional, wasn't it, in the room, particularly from some of the former police officers, such as Maggie Oliver, who worked with these poor women.
That's right, it was an explosive and emotional press conference filled with vindication for Maggie Oliver, the whistleblower who quit Greater Manchester Police to expose the scandal, but also for Sarah Rowbotham, who also was a part of Rochdale Council in describing the crisis as it was unfolding. She was ignored, she was lambasted, but today she had the opportunity to be shown that her story and her testimony was correct and that she was ignored by senior leaders both in the police and the council when she was making these complaints. And the report is damning. All 173 pages of it includes several instances of grave police and multi-agency failure. It also identifies some 96 men who still pose a risk to children. It says that the police ignored several avenues of potential investigation to get a grip on this child abuse scandal. And for that, the Greater Manchester Police Chief Constable Stephen Watson said sorry.
I am so sorry that your childhoods were so irretrievably blighted and scarred with such profound consequences. One of the primary responsibilities of the police is to protect the vulnerable from the cruel and the predatory. And in this regard, we failed you.
Well, it was an extraordinary moment because soon after Stephen Watson gave that apology, we then heard from Maggie Oliver, who directly lambasted the Chief Constable for his apology, and when she said the failings of the past were still continuing today.
This report talks about the past. But what I want to do is to bring it from the past into the present and into the future, because my work in the Maggie Oliver Foundation now means that I have current information about what is going on today. And I would say categorically, and I am sorry, Mr. Watson, but the failures that happened then are still happening now.
Well, those are a particularly strong statement to make from Maggie Oliver, particularly because the failures of the past were so extreme. In a couple of the cases that we heard about today, one girl was named as a co-conspirator in her case without being informed. This had a deplorable effect on her mental health. And we also heard an extraordinary and disgusting story about a girl who had an aborted fetus kept as DNA storage without her or her family being informed. So if what Maggie Oliver alleges, that the failures of the past are happening today, then those are extreme statements to make.
Charlie Peters there in Manchester. Just extraordinary, Sarah Vine, that we're still talking about this and that there are nearly 100 men still walking the streets.
And they know who they are.
And they know who they are. I mean, I have to say, this has been a really difficult case because it's been to do with prejudice, really. And prejudice against the girls themselves, who were considered to be sort of off the rails and, you know, this whole awful sort of victim-blaming thing where, you know, it was felt that they probably...
And they were young and promiscuous and poor.
Promiscuous and all this kind of stuff. And fear of offending a section of society.
So they were predominantly Pakistani men?
Yes, for sort of cultural sensitivity reasons. And I remember, I mean, the Mail has been doing this for a long time, and I've written columns about it. And every time, you know, I wrote about it or we wrote about it, you'd get these awful emails from people saying you're racist, you're horrible, how you're inciting hatred. And no, that wasn't the case. These people were doing awful, illegal things and they should have been stopped. But the whole reason they weren't was because of this sort of cultural sensitivity. Maggie Oliver should get a day.
Oh, she's
heroic.
What she has done kind of consistently, and she's been banging on for years and years and years. And
she's incredibly brave.
Such an advocate. And she's had to put up with so many men. I'm sorry.
I get it.
It has been... It's also been a case that has really highlighted the sexism in the police system and the sort of bias against women and girls, particularly, which we've seen in cases like Sarah Everard. You know, this sort of cultural, this ingrained culture of sexism against certain types of women. Maggie has done this amazing job, and it's really...
And a statement that Maggie has put online this morning, this is before the press conference and the review this morning. She says, to my absolute certainty, this has been a travesty of justice. I was very vocal in sharing this opinion with anyone who would listen to or give me a platform. My repeated protestations eventually led to this independent review in 2018. So for almost 6 years, I have been sharing the truth with the review team. I have fought for the real-life victims to be allowed to share their stories with that team in person. And she goes on, by nature, I want to trust the review team with whom I've shared so much. I hope this report doesn't pull any punches and is a true reflection of how the incompetent destroyed many lives.
And there was a clear decision to stop the investigation, to go no further, to cover it up, to ignore the girls. Do you think there should be disciplinary action, potentially even criminal action?
I mean, I don't think sorry is really quite enough, to be perfectly honest. There needs to be root and branch reform of whatever system.
It's a bit like the post office, isn't it?
It's a bit
well,
like
apologise.
I mean, this is a scandal that I think started in the 90s, didn't it? I can't remember the exact dates. I think
2004 to 13 was, I think, the period of time that this is looked at.
Yeah,
but early 2000s.
It does go further back as well. There are other cases that do go further back, and I just, you know, you feel that no one is really prepared to take responsibility for it. And also, it's interesting that Andy Burnham, the Labour mayor, is now sort of, you know, getting behind it. I mean, again, when we were doing it, the Labour Party didn't want to touch this.
No,
because, of course, it's their core.
It's almost important that
constituency.
It is important that it is a Labour mayor that's saying this.
I think it is really important, and all credit to him.
Right, we've got to move on. We're a bit late for the news, but coming up after the news, red card for Lineker, pressures growing on the BBC to sanction Gary Lineker after the presenter reposted a call for Israel to be punished by FIFA. That and much more after your morning's news with a very patient Sophia.
Thank you, Bev. It's 10:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Robert O'Brien and Andrew Kelly have been jailed for life at the High Court in Glasgow for the murder of 14-year-old Caroline Glacken in 1996. The pair and a third person, Donna Mary Brand, were previously found guilty of killing O'Brien's 14-year-old girlfriend, Caroline Glacken, in 1996. During the trial, the court heard from victim's mother, Margaret McKeish, who said she did not approve of her daughter's relationship with O'Brien because he was older than her. Speaking outside court after the sentencing, she said, "This is a day we never thought would happen." The UK will send 20,000 troops across Europe as Britain looks to counter an alarming rise in Russian aggression. It'll include deployments from the Army, the Navy and the RAF in what's being described as the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. The drill, which involves 31 nations, will see troops preparing for the invasion of a NATO member state by any aggressor.
Britain has often accomplished the seemingly impossible before. Our history is littered with moments when we faced down the threat and we have triumphed. But looking ahead, we are in a new era and we must be prepared to deter our enemies, to lead our allies and defend our nation.
Girls were left at the mercy of paedophile grooming gangs due to failings by senior police and council leaders. That's according to a comprehensive new report covering nearly 10 years of failed investigations by Greater Manchester Police. It highlights years of widespread organised sexual abuse of children in the Rochdale area, despite what it described as compelling evidence reported to authorities as early as 2004. The Mayor of Greater Manchester has apologised for the system's failings. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2736 and €1.1632. The price of gold is £1,614.77 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,614 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come on Blue Monday that we are trying to cheer up for you, Gary Lineker has landed himself in hot water again. He just acts with impunity.
I think he does it deliberately.
I think he's trying to get the sack, don't you? We'll have the latest thoughts on that from our panel and a lot more. I want to hear from you as well. gbviews@gbnews.com. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
You're with Britain's News, I'm Chief News Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner. It is about 10:39. We've got our panel here, Emma Wolfe and former Labour advisor Matthew Larter.
Morning, both.
Good morning. Look, I can't stand Gary Lineker. People listening and watching can't stand him. What's he done now?
So, well, he's retweeted a call for Israel to be banned from international football competitions, and this was the post. Well, because of its perceived failings in the Gaza war, basically for genocide.
Defending
yeah, absolutely. I'm merely being the conduit for the story.
Yeah.
And he retweeted. Not only did he retweet this, but it was from a controversial campaign group. So he's in trouble this morning. It appears we couldn't find it on his Twitter feed when we were looking just now, so it may have been deleted. We think it may have been deleted as far as our eyes couldn't see it, but we haven't had kind of, official confirmation that it's been deleted, as it were. But clearly the pressure from the BBC is building on him as we speak. It's getting a bit daft, isn't it?
Do you think he just, Emma, wants to be fired in a blaze of glory and then go and work for another football channel? Because he's on £1.4 million from the BBC, which is eye-watering and ridiculous with taxpayers' money. But he could go and work for a commercial football broadcaster and make 5 times that amount.
I don't think he wants to be fired from the BBC. I think he wants to have his own way and keep doing what he's doing. It's like a child, isn't it? Every time you tell them not to do that, they'll do it again. And he must know that this was extremely controversial. We think it's gone. I don't know if Bev's found it yet. But it was up there for a couple of hours. It's clearly...
Long enough to cause trouble.
Absolutely.
To provoke, to enrage.
Long enough to do that. He's made his point. He's shown again that he's bigger than the BBC, even though everybody else has to follow the rules. Once again, he's got his way. I think it has gone. I think it has disappeared.
And the BBC are scared of him because of the huge viewers he draws to that programme. How do they know he's the reason they watch it, Match of the Day?
I just don't get this thing that the presenter is...
Aren't they watching the stupid football match?
Aren't they watching the football match? And wouldn't they watch that if...
Of course they would.
And I'm a football fan, and I don't really care who's commentating.
Well, the ratings went up in the 2 weeks he was off, but it was quite effective strike action because his fellow pundits took a secondary action. If they were in a trade union, it would be illegal, and they suddenly didn't appear, so there were no pundits at all, and then the ratings went up. I just think...
their punditry is irritating and boring, and people just want
to watch the actual highlights. I think what's interesting about this is the BBC needs to make a decision. Does it want to have, does it think Gary Lineker and, a few 100,000 people extra watching Match of the Day as they perceive it is more important than having endless political rows, which are just dragging it down?
Haven't we all tried to be really careful about this issue? I'm just thinking about, I wouldn't retweet, whatever my views on Israel. This is a real tinderbox of a situation. I think we've all tried to be really careful, really sensitive. He hasn't. I think that's what it comes
and I tell you what worries me is that a lot of people on the liberal left, as it were, sort of rush to his defence. I tell you what, he'll be tweeting just as much to attention grab and clickbait under a Labour government as he will under the Tories.
But why is the BBC so obsessed by ratings? I've never understood this. They don't need to chase ratings. They're not a commercial organisation that depends on ad revenue. The ad revenue is higher the bigger the audience share. The BBC don't need to chase ratings.
No, they shouldn't be chasing ratings. What the BBC... Reach is important for the BBC so that at least people dip in and most people feel they have a reason and a relationship to pay that licence fee. But, just chasing ratings is daft. And look, it is just becoming a kind of national sport. What will Gary say this week and how pathetic will the BBC be in response?
Well, looking at what he actually retweeted, so this is the Palestinian campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel, challenges at Israel apartheid via academic, cultural, sports and anti-pinkwashing campaigns. And they are saying that Israel should not be allowed to take part in sports events effectively, and that is what Gary Lineker has tweeted.
They say it should be removed from all global tournaments until it ends its grave violations of international law.
Which ones are they?
This is the pro-Palestinian campaigners.
No reference to what Hamas did on October the 7th.
But for Lineker to retweet that is pretty inflammatory.
Because it's all part of this academic boycott, which has been very controversial, particularly within the University Lecturers' Union, where some people have left because the University Lecturers' Union passed a motion that was just kind of supportive of a boycott. It's a bit more, sort of slightly more nuanced. So it's not exactly like it's motherhood and apple pie he's tweeting. It's highly controversial. It isn't, and of course, one of the reasons they say about Gary when he talks about immigration or whatever is that it's not directly part of... He talks about football on the BBC. This is about football.
This is his
the killer.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's in his own backyard.
So has he gone too far this time? Look, he's gone too far every time.
Some of what Gary says I agree with. I don't agree with this, but some of what he tweets I agree with. But the problem is I was at the BBC for 15 years. It felt like it anyway. And, them's was rules. I had my own political views. I had to keep them under wraps for my time at the BBC. Gary needs to do the same. We all play by the rules.
You were part of that inbuilt left-wing bias.
Oh, that's not what the Labour spin doctors used to tell me when I got complaints.
Got complaints. Left-wing bias. Now we know 15 years. And then his next job was working for Ed Miliband.
It was.
A seamless transition from the BBC to
it was literally for yes.
Talking of which,
done it very officially. I was made redundant.
Well, talking which is seamless.
Labour Party.
No, but well, you are when you lose an election.
Yeah, and they've lost a lot of those.
Yeah, which brings us on to our next story, which is this Telegraph front page, Emma, which is saying that the Tories are going to face a 1997-style general election wipeout. They'll retain just 169 seats. Labour would sweep to power with 385 if there was an election called, I guess, today.
And that every red wall seat gained in 2019 under Boris Johnson would be lost to Labour. This is a pretty devastating front page, isn't it? The Tories.
Yeah.
You look at the photo, you look at
great choice of photo, isn't it? Yeah.
If that was on
this isn't
on
news,
but if it was on the front page of the Guardian, you wouldn't bat an eye because you would expect it.
This is a Tory graph, and it's pretty full on. I mean, lots of Tories, as you say. We know they're already looking to their next careers. Yeah. Lots of Tory MPs, I think, are going to be even more so kind of dusting off their Rolodex.
Totally.
Checking out what they're going to do next. Maybe thinking about crossing the floor. Maybe thinking about, shimmying over...
More by-election.
Whatever, exactly.
But should there be a small note of scepticism about this, bearing in mind this poll, which is 14,000 people, huge, YouGov, but it's funded by an organisation called Conservative Britain Alliance. I've never heard of it.
No, but apparently they were working in coalition with Lord Frost, the former European minister, and on the right of the Tory party, which is he's obviously he writes for the Telegraph, so he's obviously it's obviously in cahoots with the Telegraph in terms of they're giving it to them exclusively
because they think Rishi Sunak is not a proper Conservative.
Absolutely,
and it's Conservative.
I agree with
and of course, and this is ahead of the Rwanda votes which is expected later in the week,
which might give them all some sort of fuel in their tank.
I think we might come on to talk about it also. There's been a poll funded by Aaron Banks, the Leave guy, in Clacton, in the seat which the UKIP did hold when the floor crossing Douglas Carswell went, saying that that's the seat that Farage should win, and that's the seat he should stand in at the election, and that's to try and encourage him. So it's quite interesting that from two Tory right-wing groups or sections of the families, the right-wing families, are trying to put pressure on Rishi about the electoral wipeout.
And yet he knows if he goes too far on the Rwanda thing, he's not going far enough for me. People on the left of the party, he's got to revolt. They're coming from both sides.
Exactly, and that's when you know you're really in trouble, when you're getting it from both sides. And of course, one of the interesting things that this poll says, and Telegraph says to us, is that there will be many Portillo moments for those of us old enough can remember when Michael Portillo, Michael Portillo lost.
Shapps, who if he's still speaking at Langsouth, flipping well deserves it.
I think he's only just stood down
because he's been on for about 55 minutes. So he's on the list.
He's on the list.
The chance of Exchequer, he's definitely a toast because the Liberal Democrats have got that.
Absolutely. In total, 11, including in some unlikely Labour gains like Banbury, to take out the Attorney-General who sits for Banbury. So
Lydia will be very wounded by this poll because she thinks she's got a chance of being leader next time. It's Penny Mordaunt. She's the leader of the Commons. She's run before. She got all that publicity for holding a sword. I don't quite know why that made her a Tory.
She did the nation proud.
Oh, come on. Embarrassing. Embarrassing.
I can't believe I'm defending a Tory.
I know.
but she's got a majority of over 12,000. So that shows how vulnerable these Tories are. They'd be down to 100.
Starmer would have
it's almost exactly the same number they had in 1997, and then
20-seat majority for Starmer.
Yeah,
because if they don't vote reform, it's a hung parliament. So that's going to be the Tory message.
And I think that's
vote reform, you get a Labour landslide.
Absolutely. And I think this poll will be used by that. A, you vote reform, you get a Labour landslide, and B, unless Rishi puts more of his tanks on the reform's territory, you're going to get a Labour landslide.
But our viewers who message us in their thousands are saying, even if we know our vote for reform will mean that we get a Labour government, we are so willing to give the Conservatives a bloody nose. We will.
And some of those reform voters are ex-Labour voters. Yeah. People forget this. You know, when I meet people who spot me on GB News, they come up to me and say, "Well, I used to vote Labour. I voted Labour all my life. I voted Tory once. I'm going to do reform." So the Tories seem to not think that reform is a block of Tory voters chopped off.
Labour.
Because Labour no longer
David
represents...
Bull and Richard Tice about this last week of reform, and I said to them, are you comfortable with the fact that you're basically going to let Labour in through the back door? And they said, you've got to vote the way you believe. And it is a good point, but it's also the problem...
And it is a longer-term plan, I think, isn't it?
And it's part of the problem for Labour, because if they do lose some votes to reform, that Keir Starmer changes his mind, it seems, every other week on something.
Harsh.
We don't really know what he stands for.
Well, I think we do know what he stands for. Yeah, I think we know. Well, I think he's got 6 months, and he's got to set it out more clearly, and he's got to appeal. You asked why these people go from.
We've been saying that for a week.
Well, I think he does have a clear plan. I think he does have a clear plan on things like immigration, but I don't think he talks about it enough. So, you know, I'm very glad that this week he's been talking about smashing the gangs.
Again?
Yes, because the Tories still haven't.
That before.
Well,
he's going to smash the gangs through international law.
He didn't mention
What about the actual vote?
The difference is
French police to wake up, is he?
Yeah, well I'll tell you what.
They can wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you were on the French police and we're giving money to the French, we're just wasting money at the moment giving it to the French. If this was a product, we take it back to the shop and shout at them until we actually got value for money, and that's what we should be doing.
I love the idea.
Our police on French soil.
I love the idea that Starmer has all these brilliant policies, but he's just keeping them quiet.
No, he's not keeping them quiet. I think it needs to come. I think his appeal needs to come together, and I think we need and he talks more about his values and what sort of prime minister he'll be. But I'm glad that he's on specifics.
We know he's going to clean our children's teeth.
Exactly. When he gives specifics, then you can't win with you guys.
You know what's going to be decisive is A, reform, and B, people who just don't turn out.
Kids are going to be taller under Labour.
A lot of people are not.
Kids are going to be taller under Labour.
That was a particularly unfortunate headline.
Into this rather nice little minor public school, and you've saved and scrimped and scraped. By the way, fine 20% because they're going to shove VAT on it. Won't affect a single child going to Eton, my dear.
What it is going to do is raise the money that will pay for the extra mental health appointments and the other things announced in the child health plan last week.
Yeah, it's got to pay for quite a lot, hasn't it?
It exactly adds up. And all the costings will come out as is customary before the election.
And he raised
you say he always talks about immigration. He didn't talk about immigration in his conference speech, which I thought was a mistake. He has now been very clear and on the front foot on Labour's plan to smash the gangs.
Right.
And really tackle the problem which the Tories haven't. Use anti-terrorism legislation, for example, the Tories refused to do.
Should we talk about the Queen being our lovely late Queen, who, as we've learned today, Emma, in the Daily Mail, very reliable royal journalist, that the Queen was never seen as angry as she was when the Sussexes said that she'd given their blessing to them, calling their daughter Lilibet.
That's a brilliant story, and it just absolutely rings true.
Rings
so this
true,
is
doesn't
Robert
it?
Hardman in the Daily Mail, who is incredibly reliable, impeccably sourced. His new book, Charles III, New King, New Court, The Inside Story, is coming out. It's being serialised in the Mail. And I love this. The decision to name Lilibet in 2021 raised eyebrows.
Yeah, you could see her arching the eyebrow, can't you?
I think the thing that winds a lot of people up is that Meghan and Harry had to come out and claim this was done with her sanction, with her blessing. You know, I don't think she would have reacted in any way if they had simply named her Lilibet, which was, remember, the late Queen's childhood name.
Yeah.
It's an affectionate childhood name. She couldn't say her own name, Elizabeth, properly, so she apparently said Lilibet, and that's sort of what she was called.
And very few people were allowed to use it, just the closest affection circle.
Because it's a childhood thing.
Yeah.
And apparently the Queen was quite infuriated by this. Again, recollections may vary, that, you know, classic
it just shows they lie.
royal line.
They lie.
It shows they lie.
Because they employed expensive lawyers to try to close people down from saying anything else.
Set these horrible lawyers onto people who even questioned this naming of Lilibet, who's only been to the UK once.
There's no kind of subtlety or there's no sort of nuance to the way they think the Sussexes. If the Queen had just said, oh, lovely, they've taken that as her giving her approval. There's no compound thinking with either of them.
No, and it's dragging her. It was trying to drag her into the spin wall, wasn't it?
It might just be.
And they're briefing the journalists.
Because what could she do? She couldn't say, I don't want you to give.
No, that would be terrible.
Because that would sound childish.
Absolutely. But as Emma so rightly says, it's not so much what they claim, it's then the fact that they then go into the process of how it was claimed, who said what to who, and use people as pawns in their game with the press, and then that becomes a legal game.
Of leaving the country and, you know, turning their backs and
have
still
to leave this for now. Emma, Matthew, thank you for now. Now, according to calculations, it's the most depressing day of the year. Are you depressed? I'm a bit. I'm not feeling. I can't lie. I'm not top of the world today.
January is being
I've got January blues.
With you and with you at home is cheering me up. I hope we're cheering you up as well. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. No.
Brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Brace yourselves for the chill when you step outside this morning. This plunge of cold Arctic air is now well and truly across all areas of the UK. It is a very frosty start to the new working week. There will be some icy stretches around as well, so do take care when you are travelling first thing. If it's snow you're after though, you'll need to be in a region that's exposed to the northerly winds. So northern Scotland seeing some snow showers, Northern Ireland, maybe some sleet showers for parts of West Wales, southwest England, and some just skirting parts of East Yorkshire down into Norfolk as well. But further inland, it will be dry with plenty amounts of sunshine, but still very cold despite that sunshine. And the frost will quickly return once the sun goes down this evening. Another very cold night on the cards right across the board. A slight change in wind direction to a northwesterly could allow some snow showers to push further inland across northwest England, parts of Wales as we head into the early hours of Tuesday morning. But for everyone, those temperatures well and truly sub-freezing to kick off the day. As we move throughout Tuesday, we do need to keep an eye on this feature moving in from the northwest. There's still some uncertainty in regards to the exact track of it, but it could provide more snow for parts of Scotland, maybe into the Pennine districts as well, high ground areas of Northern Ireland also. Further towards central southern areas of England, it will stay drier with sunshine, hazier skies though in the far southwest. Temperatures again only seeing highs of 1 to 5 degrees Celsius, and that
warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday night showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show. Every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11 a.m. on Monday, the 15th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. So, Tory wipeout. The Conservatives are facing a 1997-style election defeat, a major poll suggests today. Labour would sweep into power with a huge majority. Have you turned your back on the Tories? We want to hear from you and tell us why.
And left at the mercy of the grooming gangs. Breaking in the last hour, Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, said the police failed to protect those young girls in Rochdale. Let's have a listen.
Over many years, Greater Manchester Police failed to give the investigation of these serious crimes the priority and resources necessary.
And get tough on Rwanda. Conservative MPs are demanding that the Prime Minister toughens up the Rwanda bill. Today, many high-profile MPs are threatening to resign if he doesn't.
And our late Queen's Fury, bombshell revelations in a new book revealed that Her Majesty, the Queen Elizabeth, was infuriated by Harry and Meghan claiming she'd given her blessing to their daughter being named Lilibet, which was her childhood nickname. We have all the details. I imagine her fury was rare, but it would have been quite a sight to behold.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Grant Shapps has stopped talking now.
I doubt it.
As far as we know, Grant Shapps' watch proves that he has stopped talking, but he was spelling out this morning a little bit about what we're going to be doing in our defence strategy. We'll tell you a bit about that as well with our panel, if we can stay awake long enough to hear what he had to say. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Thank you, Bev. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The UK will send 20,000 troops across Europe as Britain looks to counter an alarming rise in Russian aggression. It'll include deployments from the Army and the Navy and the RAF in what's being described as the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. The drill, which involves 31 nations, will see troops preparing for the invasion of a NATO member state by any aggressor. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is calling it a vital reassurance against the Putin menace.
Britain has often accomplished the seemingly impossible before. Our history is littered with moments when we faced down the threat and we have triumphed. But looking ahead, we are in a new era and we must be prepared to deter our enemies, to lead our allies and defend our nation.
2 people have been jailed for life for the murder of a 14-year-old Caroline Glacken in a historic murder case dating back to 1996. Robert O'Brien and Andrew Kelly were found guilty of killing the schoolgirl more than 27 years ago. A third person, Donna Mary Brand, remains in hospital and will be sentenced at a later date. The court heard that the victim had been infatuated with O'Brien before she was killed in what prosecutors described as a violent and horrific attack. Speaking outside court after the sentencing, the victim's mother, Margaret McKeish, spoke of her long wait for justice, saying, "It's a day we thought would never happen." Girls were left at the mercy of paedophile grooming gangs due to failings by senior police and council leaders. That's according to a comprehensive new report covering nearly 10 years of failed investigations by Greater Manchester Police. It highlights years of widespread organised sexual abuse of children in the Rochdale area, despite what it described as compelling evidence reported to authorities as early as 2004. It found that a reluctance among children to make formal complaints was often used as an excuse to avoid investigations. Greater Manchester Police Chief Constable Stephen Watson says the report paints a damning picture.
The findings evidenced within it are shocking, stark, and shameful. It speaks to the systemic failure of various agencies to pull together and do the obvious and the right thing. And above all, it outlines in painful detail all of those missed opportunities where decisive action could and should have been taken.
An Israeli footballer who was detained in Turkey for displaying a message written on a bandage may be sacked from his club. Text reading 100 days, 710 could be seen written on player Sajiv Yehezevskal's arm, a reference to Israel's ongoing conflict with the Hamas terror group. Turkish prosecutors launched an investigation on charges of inciting people to hatred and hostility. He was released earlier this morning and is expected to arrive back in Israel today. Junior doctors in Wales are starting a 3-day walkout over pay. It'll last until Thursday morning and could see over 3,000 doctors taking industrial action. The Welsh Government says the impact on services will be significant, but insists urgent care will continue. The doctors' trade union says pay has eroded by almost a third since 2008. Drivers are increasingly being left with punctured tyres and broken wheels as potholes lead to record levels of breakdowns. Call-outs due to potholes topped 632,000 last year, which was a 5-year high, according to figures from the AA. They're part of the Pothole Partnership, a new coalition that's marketing today's National Pothole Day, with a 5-point plan for governments to repair our roads. It includes replacing temporary patches with long-term fixes and speeding up the time it takes to complete repairs. A charity says parents are experiencing complete chaos as they try to access a new government scheme that's meant to provide 15 hours of free childcare. A survey of more than 6,000 parents across England found that just 11% were able to access a code allowing them to claim their entitlement. Others complained of technical problems and incorrect advice from helplines. The Pregnant Then Screwed charity says it's become a de facto help desk after it was inundated with calls from frustrated parents. A spokesperson for the government said the childcare application system is working as intended. And a volcano that erupted yesterday in Iceland is sending lava flowing into nearby villages, covering houses. A fountain of molten rock and some smoke spewed into the sky early on Sunday, the second eruption in the country's southwest in less than a month. Iceland's Prime Minister is warning residents to take care, describing it as a very dangerous situation. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
5 migrants died yesterday after a small boat got into difficulties just off a French beach. So joining us now is our Home Security Editor Mark White and the Daily Telegraph columnist Madeleine Grant. Good morning to you both. Madeleine wants to talk to you as well about this Telegraph front page in just a moment. But Mark, let's talk about this yesterday. What happened? Who might be to blame for this?
It was criminal people smugglers who pushed these small boats out into the English Channel in less than ideal conditions. It was the first boats this weekend who crossed the English Channel successfully since the 16th of December, so pretty much a month, because of really bad weather conditions in the Channel. The weather improved to the point where it was just about passable, and of course the people smugglers on the other side, well, you know, they care very little for those who are pushing out into the Channel, except for the fact that, of course, deaths are bad for business in their eyes. But when the weather conditions are to the extent where they can make it, they push them out.
Why don't they just arrest them? They know who they are. They keep being told they know who they are. They advertise on TikTok, Mark, their wares, these people smugglers. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, well, they have certain intelligence, but whether you can prove in a court of law the link between a certain individual and the orders that they're giving to others further down the chain is always very difficult. But on that point, I think it's a very interesting one, Andrew. We've got investigations that are happening all the time with our National Crime Agency and hundreds of their personnel involved in anti-people smuggling investigations in cooperation with our partners in Europe and elsewhere around the world. That doesn't get spoken about enough, I don't think, by our politicians. But I am noticing a subtle change in the language now that's coming from our political leadership here, where they're trying to take the ball off Rwanda as being the primary deterrent to stop small boats, and they're trying to emphasise that we're doing other things, such as going after the people smugglers. Some will say about time, because Labour have been allowed to fill that particular vacuum by saying, what are they doing to go after the people smugglers if we get into power? We're going to give lots more money to the National Crime Agency to do just that. Well, the National Crime Agency are already doing that. I'm sure they will welcome more money, but they are doing that at the moment.
Madeleine, if they don't sort this immigration issue out, the Tories, and if they don't stop the small boats in their tracks, the poll today saying a 1997-style wipeout, it could be even worse.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, the poll, it actually shouldn't come as that much of a shock. It is pretty consistent with the kind of polling that we've had pretty much over the last year and a bit. But what is different about this poll is that it extrapolates the data to look, number crunch it down to every single seat.
Yeah.
And
it's 14,000 people, which is a lot. It's a big poll.
Exactly. And, you know, I think it's the kind of thing that hopefully will focus minds within the Conservative Party. Although how you fix this particular problem, I mean, it's incredibly difficult to sort out some of the problems that people complain about. And they say they've been plugging away at things like the health service and stopping the boats. And there's not that much to show for it. Or certainly I don't think that's how the public...
But we're looking at the map here on the screen, Madeleine, of the blue seats, obviously Conservative in 2019 and what is predicted in 2024. A much greater proliferation of red seats, particularly North England.
That's the red wall.
That's that red wall that we talk about, which is traditionally Labour voters going back to voting Labour.
Yeah.
We've been saying what an interesting choice for the Daily Telegraph, your newspaper, traditionally Conservative supporting, to run with this front page. I also think it's particularly pertinent that you've got a massive, unflattering picture of Rishi Sunak on the front page as well.
Yeah.
Why have the newspaper done this?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I just do the jokes at the paper, so I don't know anything more about why this particular poll was commissioned. But I think it's because it reflects the views of many of our readers.
Yeah.
That they are conservative-minded. Bear in mind that the big C does not account for everyone that would fall under the small c banner, and many people feel that the big C has become disconnected from the small c, if that makes sense.
And it's interesting, you've got on the front page too a commentary by Lord Frost, who was the Brexit Secretary with Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Many people see him as a potential Tory leader. Very difficult if you're in the House of Lords.
Yeah.
Absolutely excoriating about the Tories' failure to be Tory.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think, though, that some of the... I mean, I agree very much with a lot of what Lord Frost says, but the trouble is that even the things that he proposes, such as, you know, let's not tax people further, let's not do X, Y or Z, I still think that it's very, very difficult for them to come back, whatever they do, from the accusation that is always levelled at them, which is you guys have been in charge for 13 years.
Yeah.
People always say 13 years, well, 14 years it will be.
Yeah.
You know, it's very difficult to know what levers there are to pull that haven't already been pulled, and in a very short space of time. And the other thing to say about the poll is actually that even though these are shockingly bad results, this is possibly not even the nadir, because the polling doesn't factor take into account what might happen if people did tactical voting.
Yeah.
And it also, there is that big question mark about whether Nigel Farage will take up the mantle for reform.
Yeah.
If he did so, that would probably expand their influence. He's got a huge following, obviously, as you know, here at GB News and elsewhere. And, you know, that could probably take this poll from a kind of terrible 1997 outcome to something much worse.
It also shows in there, doesn't it, if you vote... If there's no reform on the ballot paper, it's a hung parliament. If there's reform on the ballot paper, it's a landslide Labour majority. So do you know that this will be a gift for the Tories who will say, you vote reform, you get Labour. And a big Labour government.
Yeah, but it's not equally... I do think that many people will make that point, but I also do, it's quite insulting to voters to kind of suggest you belong to us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you decide that you're very unhappy with us, there's no one else. It's almost like they're saying, ha, 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 you know, we're in a first-past-the-post system and there's nothing...
It's also, I mean...
not an attractive prospect.
And tribalism is breaking down anyway.
I think it's also worth pointing out how new a party Reform is. The very fact that they have... are making this sort of political capital, this sort of influence at this time, when they've only been around for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Where are the Liberal Democrats in all of this? Where is the Green Party?
Yeah.
You know, Reformers push themselves into this third position.
Well, to be fair, I'm not sure that's quite right, because the Lib Dems, according to this poll, are on track to get 47 seats, which almost takes them up to their high water mark.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, that was very much that they were the third party, and they were kind of respectable protest vote that would actually have some influence. And of course, you know, part of the coalition government from 2010
This will be the blue wall
and
that
actually,
collapses.
in all of the Labour success, I don't think we should forget about the pince movement of the Lib Dems, because there are some seats where they are not going to vote Labour. they are not Labour-minded people.
Yeah.
They're maybe small C Conservatives or slightly kind of wet Tories.
These are the Surrey seats,
yes,
places
exactly.
like Cheltenham and Gloucestershire.
And this
Bath.
makes it very difficult for the Prime Minister because obviously there are lots of red wall seats that are likely to go Labour, and in these seats their current MPs are warning hard about the small votes and the cost of living. But actually you talk to some Tory MPs who are in these southern seats which are facing Lib Dems and even in some cases to the Greens, and they're saying, if you go too far on this stuff, I will lose my seat to the Lib Dems Greens. So it is actually a very difficult balancing act for...
He's walking a tightrope.
Yeah.
But I think he keeps falling off it.
He does keep falling off it, but I also think who wouldn't at this point? It's very hard to come back from the mess that they're in.
Yeah, and the timing of the election as well. Mark, on Rwanda, do you think even if they get a plane in the air, before it's going to make a difference to those people gathering on the beaches of northern France?
I have to say, I'm not convinced it will. It might have made a difference back in April of 2022 when it was first announced by Boris Johnson. There was certainly concern in the camps there and among the people smugglers about what it would mean if it was going to mean everybody coming across the channel from that point on was going to get sent to this East African nation. Clearly, that's going to be a huge deterrent. But since then, as it's been delayed and delayed and delayed by court action, and also the suggestion that actually it's not going to be everybody that crosses the channel, but a proportion, and how small a proportion is up for debate. But if anybody that wants to cross the English Channel thinks that the chances of me actually going to Rwanda are about 10 or 15%, then I'm going to take that risk. You know, it's worth it. You know, 80-odd% chance of me getting to stay in the UK.
You know, Mark, we started the show this morning with Grant Shapps talking about his ambition as
There's a rumour he's still
Ministry.
speaking, by the way.
You two are very cruel.
He's pitching for his next job when he's left government, isn't he? He's going to go and work for a bomb company.
Well, according to the Telegraph poll, he's going to leave Parliament altogether because he loses his seat.
Well, exactly. So I have enormous cynicism about this lot, more than I even normally do. But, Mark, people are messaging to say, for instance, Cara has said, great speech by Grant Shapps. She says, but we can't even protect our own borders. And this is one of the issues where I think these two issues, isn't it, of immigration and defence collide, because he's there saying we're going to protect the borders in the Middle East and, you know, defend the Red Sea from the Houthi rebels and the transport passage through there. And yet we go, well, hang on a minute, you can't even stop migrants getting here, so what are you doing?
Yeah, of course, the first priority of any government is to protect its population. And although we are having a lot of, understandably, focus on what is happening out in Ukraine, first of all, now in the Middle East, and the Red Sea is the latest iteration of that, in terms of the Houthis firing all these missiles at shipping. That's hugely important for an island nation like us. We rely for 90% of the imports and exports arrive and leave by sea, so it's hugely important. But also, that kind of gets lost on many members of the public who say, right, fine, that's OK, it's in a faraway place. What about our own borders, protecting the nation from these people who are crossing illegally into the United Kingdom? You wouldn't necessarily send our aircraft carrier, of course, into the English Channel, but there is a feeling that we should be doing more.
It's a thought.
Some people will.
It's a thought.
I knew as soon as I said that.
Yeah, there's a thought.
We're going to jump.
That would probably stop some of the small boats. They wouldn't have to go round it.
The inbox just lit up at that point,
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, OK.
Why didn't we get Grant Shapps on the phone? How have we missed this? That's the point.
I'll give him a call.
That would do the trick.
Yeah, but I think to be more realistic, certainly in terms of assets in the Channel, the difficulty is that what are they going to do? Because we have a policy of, once they cross into UK waters, just picking them up and taking them to the UK.
Yeah.
Lots of defence of the Channel would only work if it was a turn-back policy. But then are you going to turn boats back to France, or at least pick people up and drop them off back in France, and risk absolutely infuriating the French? And as I say this, I can hear again you saying,
if I'm in
what a
charge,
wonderful
that's
idea.
exactly what I'm going to do. They came from your country, have them back. It's a safe country. It's part of the blessed, hallowed European Union. They can stay there and go back there.
I know a lot of our audience will agree with what you
A lot of people saying great speech by Grant Shapps. I don't know what you were watching.
I'm glad you stuck with it because we've on to something else.
And Phil says Ukraine is fighting a war for the West. This week we talk about it for the rest of us. You're talking as if Ukraine was some sort of charity. There's a burden on us. It's not. Time we banded together to get rid of Putin. There's a lot of different opinions coming in on the inbox this morning.
I mean, it's illness that will take out Putin, don't you think, Mark? He doesn't look a well man. He's rumoured to have cancer.
And who's waiting in the wings?
You know,
and then there'll be another monster to take over.
Adversary, you know.
But
they like their poison over there.
Yeah, but there'll be another monster like Putin to take over.
Well, this is it. I mean, it's that old adage, isn't it? It's better the devil
you know.
Right, Madeleine, Mark, thank you so much. Still to come this morning, the Lib Dem leader, Ed Davey, faces an election struggle for the ages against an ex-postmistress who wants to punish him for the Horizon scandal as his approval ratings tumble. That's right, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
So the Prime Minister's been speaking to the press on UK military action in Yemen. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Well, our aim is to de-escalate tensions in the region and actually restore stability back to the area. We faced an escalating series of attacks from the Houthis on commercial shipping, including an attack on Royal Navy warship. That's unacceptable. It was right that we took proportionate, targeted action against military targets to send a strong message that that behaviour is unacceptable. It was a last resort. It came after the end of exhaustive diplomatic activity, including a UN Security Council resolution, and now I think it's incumbent on the Houthis to recognise the international condemnation for what they're doing and desist. But we, of course, will not hesitate to protect our security where required.
Or further action if required.
As I say, we will not hesitate to ensure the security and safety of British people and our interests and our assets.
On the Rwanda bill, which is in the Commons this week, are you prepared to discipline your front bench over the Rwanda bill, including potentially your deputy chairman, if he votes against the measure this week or in favour of the amendments? Would you sack him and other rebels?
The Conservative Party are completely united in wanting to stop the boats. We share the frustration of the British people about this situation. That's why I set it out as one of my 5 priorities. We're all fed up with this legal merry-go-round of challenges to our Rwanda policy. I'm determined to get this new legislation onto the statute book so we can get our Rwanda scheme up and running. We've made good progress so far, thanks to the hard work of many, which means that the numbers of arrivals are down by over a third last year. That shows the plan is working. But in order to finish the job, we do need a deterrent like Rwanda, and that's why I'm determined to do everything I can to get this bill, which is, by the way, the toughest piece of migration legislation that Parliament has ever seen, onto the statute books so we can finally grip this problem.
And on the rebels, any action?
I'll say, look, of course, I'm talking to all my colleagues, but I know everyone's frustrated. I'm frustrated about this situation, and they want to see an end to the legal merry-go-round. I'm confident that the bill we've got is the toughest that anyone's ever seen, and it will resolve this issue once and for all.
Finally, on the YouGov polls in today's Daily Telegraph, it says your party's facing a 1997-style election wipeout. What's your response and how can you turn it around?
There have been lots of polls over the last year. There'll be hundreds more polls. The only one that matters is the one when the general election comes. And the choice of that election is clear. It's to stick with our plan that is working. It's delivering change for people, ensuring that they can have the peace of mind that there's a brighter future for their children, that we can have renewed pride in our country. Or the alternative, which is Keir Starmer and going back to square one with him. He can't say what he will do. He's been leader of the opposition for 4 years now. He hasn't said what he'd do differently, and that's because he doesn't have a plan. So that's the choice. Stick with the plan that is delivering change, making a difference, or go back to square one.
Prime Minister, thank you.
Ever says the words Nigel Farage or Reform. Do you know why? Because he knows awareness of that party is his biggest enemy.
Yeah, well, they're a big threat to him. Now, GBNews will have an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister later today, so do stay tuned. Now, Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey is going to be challenged at the next general election in his own constituency by a former deputy postmistress.
That's right. Yvonne Tracy says that he can't be allowed to stand again unchallenged in his seat of Kingston and Surbiton.
Delighted to say Yvonne Tracy, who is a councillor for the Local Residents Association, joins me. Morning to you, Yvonne. Nice to talk to you. We talked about this in the Mail at the weekend. You are outraged as a former deputy postmistress at the way postmasters and postmistresses have been treated, not least by Ed Davey, who we all know from this TV drama, Yvonne, told Mr Bates to clear off. He was too busy to speak to him. He didn't take it very seriously, and then we've discovered he's been taking a lot of money from the law firm that's been acting against the postmasters and postmistresses.
Yes, I know. It's it beggars belief, really, doesn't it? I think that's what made me, you know, let's be honest, it's just not Ed Davey here. Loads of people should hang their heads in shame for to the post office. But when Mr Bates went to Sir Ed Davey in 2010, when he'd gathered years of evidence for hundreds of postmasters, the least Ed Davey could have done was seen him and spoke to him. Maybe if he had and probed a bit deeper, this could have been dealt with in 2010, but instead there's been a lot more convictions since then, and it breaks my heart.
That's what you're doing now then, Yvonne, to take him on.
Well, I would have loved a postmaster to stand against him, but obviously I can understand a lot of them, their confidence has been shot, they've had enough of government. So I thought, do you know, he's my MP in my area where I've lived all my life in New Malden. it's got to be me. I'm not a politician. I'm a 68-year-old grandmother, but I've got to take him on because at the moment people are cross because they've just seen that series. I don't want them in a couple of weeks' time to forget. They've got to remember that this is Sir Ed Davey refused to even meet with Alan Bates, who was representing hundreds of postmasters. How can that be right?
And Yvonne, we know some postmasters went to prison. They've lost their homes, their life savings. 4 took their own lives. It's had a shattering effect on families, a shattering effect on so many people. By standing against Ed Davey, do you hope this might even galvanise even more people to come forward? Because we know there are still other postmasters and postmistresses who were affected by this scandal who haven't come forward because I think there's still some of them in a state of shock.
Oh, I think
are we losing
maybe Yvonne can't hear us. Oh, that's a shame. I really wanted to talk to her. Let's see if we can get that back. So she's going to stand as an independent then?
Yeah, so she's... We've got her back. We've got you back. No, we're not got her back. We're going to try and get her back. So Yvonne is... I talked to her last week, so I did a big piece about Ed Davey in the Mail on Saturday. She's a local councillor for the Kingston Independent Residents
She's not a Conservative councillor.
No, not a Conservative. And she's only been a councillor for 18 months. We've got her back. Yvonne, we've got you back. I'm just saying there's still quite a lot of postmasters and postmistresses who we think still haven't come forward yet. By you speaking out, by you standing, this may perhaps draw even more people out, and then we'll get to the bottom of just how big a scandal this is.
Yes, I hope so. I hope this will give the ordinary person confidence to come out and speak. It's difficult, isn't it? Because they make it very uncomfortable for ordinary people like us. But this mustn't go away. Don't let us not forget the postmasters haven't been told what happened. They haven't been cleared. They haven't been given answers. We can't let it go away. But it's got to be done soon. People have died waiting.
And so you're going to stand as an independent candidate, are you, Yvonne, if I've understood correctly?
Yes, absolutely. I'm standing under the banner of justice for sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses.
OK, I see.
And, of course, you had 23 years in the post office. You ran, you were deputy sub-post office. I think you met your husband, Mark, during the post office, who worked for the post office as well. The post office is in your blood. How do you think they've behaved over all of this, Yvonne?
Yes, I worked there since 1989. And when I first started, you know, it was such a... people used to trust the post office. It was held in high regard. I'm angry now that they'll never be trusted again. They will never be trusted again. So, yes, I am angry. The damage that has been done to the post office, we won't ever get that back.
And are you glad that wretched woman, Bennells, gave back her CBE? She had to be shamed into it, didn't she? The former chief executive.
Didn't she? Yeah, didn't she just? I mean, this is it. Isn't it a shame that it's taking ordinary people to shout and say, do the right thing? Why don't you just do it anyway?
Yeah, well, that is the motto of this decade almost, isn't it? Yvonne, Tracy, thank you so much from Kingston.
Lovely to talk to you. And we're going to keep in touch with her.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. I love that. I love that.
This is so angry that nobody's doing anything, that Ed Davey's going to seemingly get away with it. Of course, he says he was misled by the post office, he was lied to by the post office, but he was post office minister. He should have been curious enough to think, why are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds being prosecuted?
Good
so she's decided to stand against him, and
just be a thorn in his side. Every time that he is out there canvassing, her name also will be on the doorsteps. Love it. Right, still to come this morning, Mouse of Commons. Parliament spend £100,000 to battle super mice plaguing the corridors of power. That and much more after your morning's news with Sophia.
Thank you, Bev. It's 11:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says British strikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen are aimed at de-escalating tensions as he prepares to address MPs later. The government insists its decision not to consult Parliament regarding the strikes was important for reasons of operational security, following a series of attacks on commercial ships passing through the Red Sea. Rishi Sunak says tensions in the region must not be allowed to boil over.
Our aim is to de-escalate tensions in the region and actually restore stability back to the area. We faced an escalating series of attacks from the Houthis on commercial shipping, including an attack on Royal Navy warship. That's unacceptable. It was right that we took proportionate targeted action against military targets to send a strong message that that behaviour is unacceptable. It was a last resort. It came after the end of exhaustive diplomatic activity, including a UN Security Council resolution.
The UK will send 20,000 troops across Europe as Britain looks to counter an alarming rise in Russian aggression. It'll include deployments from the Army, the Navy and the RAF in what's being described as the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. The drill involves 31 nations and will see troops preparing for the invasion of a NATO member state by any aggressor. Girls were left at the mercy of paedophile grooming gangs due to failings by senior police and council leaders. That's according to a comprehensive new report covering nearly 10 years of failed investigations by Greater Manchester Police. It highlights years of widespread organised sexual abuse of children in the Rochdale area, despite what it described as compelling evidence reported to authorities as early as 2004. Greater Manchester Police has apologised for failings. And a volcano that erupted yesterday in Iceland is sending lava flowing into nearby villages, covering houses. A fountain of molten rock and smoke spewed into the sky early on Sunday, the second eruption in the country's southwest in less than a month. Iceland's Prime Minister is warning residents to take care, describing it as a very dangerous situation. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2727 and €1.1631. The price of gold is £1,612 and 49 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,604 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. Still to come, do not let the blues beat you.
Why, we're wearing blue.
Well, do you know, it's not deliberate. We didn't even know. I've even got my blue glasses today, but it is officially Blue Monday. We are going to help you fight off the Monday blues, middle of January. Doesn't feel like there's a lot to look forward to.
Very blue if you're in that Tory Conservative poll in the Telegraph.
Yeah.
Cabinet Minister Grant Shapps, you've just spoken for 55 minutes and you're going to lose your seat anyway.
He's pitching for a job. Right, this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Time's 11:40.
That's right. So today has been labelled the most depressing day of the year. This is due to various statistics that people who know about these things do. So, do you have Blue Monday woes? I don't feel on top of the world today, I can't lie. But we know what will cheer us up. It's our Yorkshire reporter, Anna Riley. Anna, there you are in Yorkshire. Tell us what today is all about and what are we supposed to do to raise our spirits?
Good morning to you both. Well, we're here at Rotherham train station in South Yorkshire. We're joined by the Samaritans who are doing outreach work here. I'm with Fiona Wilson. She's a Samaritans volunteer. And the Samaritans are trying to dispel that myth of Blue Monday and instead call it Brew Monday. So they're encouraging people to come together over a cuppa and just have a chat about how they are feeling. Fiona, what is it about dispelling that myth that today isn't all about being blue?
Well, we've renamed it Brew Monday, and the idea is to encourage people to sit down with somebody that they care about, have a cuppa, doesn't have to be tea, and just start a conversation and catch up with them.
And what is it about that changing of mindsets? Is it sort of not letting the calendar decide how we're feeling?
Yeah, of course. Doesn't have to be this day. It can be any day of the year that someone can be feeling, they've got things on their mind. So just talk to people. It certainly helps.
And Samaritans, of course, a charity that's been going for 70 years now. You're a listener yourself, and Samaritans receive a call for help every 10 seconds, don't they? What's so important about that 24/7 service for people that are reaching out, potentially feeling suicidal?
I think the important thing is that we're there, like you say, 24 hours a day, and it's a free service, and that if you call Samaritans, somebody will listen to you, and we won't judge, we won't tell you what to do, but we'll just be there for you.
And what advice or tips do you have at this time of year? We're lucky today, we've got a sunny day even though it's cold, but the weather can bring us down, the cost of living, we've just had Christmas, and January can feel like a bit of a low month, can't it?
Yeah, of course, January is a difficult time for quite a lot of people. But at any time of the year, there could be something that's worrying you. And whatever it is, you can call Samaritans. And you can use our number, 116 123.
And you do outreach work at train stations like this, and you encourage commuters to talk to each other as well, don't you?
Yes, that's the other thing that we do encourage at rail stations, is just to keep an eye and see if there's someone that might be distressed, and try and go up to them and have a chat with them.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Thank you. So that's Brew Monday, and it's all across the UK. So if you go into a train station, you might see Samaritans like Fiona, but the charity are also saying you can do it in the workplace, you can host your own tea party, you can do it at home, and you can do it virtually as well, over Zoom if you work from home. And just pick up the phone as well. Just speak to a loved one and ask them how they're feeling today on Brew Monday.
All right, thank you so much, Anna Riley there in Rotherham. Our panel are back with us. Matthew. Sorry, Matthew. It's Blue Monday.
Don't worry, I've been called a lot worse. even on the...
Sorry, Matthew. And Emma Wolfe is with us as well. We were just saying, Blue Monday. What do you do to cheer yourselves up, guys, on days like this?
Come to GB News.
Come to GB News, obviously.
Good answer.
Also, sunshine. I was cycling along. Apparently, cycling helps beat the office blues. That's in one of the
Unless
papers.
you get knocked off your bike.
No, but I just thought, come on. And I thought, shake yourself out of this. It's cold, but it's sunny, and the sun was out. It wasn't raining. So you've got to just kind of almost, give yourself a shake and say, look, we're alive. We're all right. We haven't got this, that, and the other thing. We're not in Rwanda.
Do you ever go through red lights?
No, of course I don't. And yes, I wear a helmet.
What about you,
All these
Matthew?
questions. I would never ask you that.
If you're feeling a bit down on a day...
I think sunshine is absolutely vital. But the other thing is, none of us take enough vitamin D in the winter. The NHS... make sure you take your vitamin D supplements.
Get outside.
And you have to have strong vitamin D. Yes. You have strong vitamin D.
Yeah.
Really
I'm going to try and go for an outdoor swim this afternoon.
Oh, crikey.
At Hampton Lido, no, it's beautiful, it's heated, and that, I know, is the best way to raise my spirits.
It really is. Anything that gets the blood circulating and gets you outside.
It's when you get out afterwards, isn't it? That's the point. It's really cold.
But then you get into a quick shower.
Just got to go
right. OK, let's move on to another depressing topic then. Rwanda. OK, Emma. The UK grants asylum to Rwandans despite the claims that the country is safe. What's this about?
Well, this is the front page of the Eye, so I'm afraid I'm taking it with a huge dollop of scepticism and a huge dollop of salt. They're saying that because 6 people from Rwanda have been granted asylum in this country since 2022, this basically overturns Sunak's the entire premise of his bill. Dominic Grieve has been saying this makes a nonsense of a bill that deems Rwanda to be safe. 6 people since 2022. That hardly overturns...
It just shows what a shambles our immigration and processing system is too.
Of course it does.
They just want to get these things done. Dominic Grieve, of course, is rather bitter and twisted, isn't he? He's a former Tory who lost the whip. And Rwanda, we know, of course, Matthew, don't we, that the United Nations has been sending refugees to Rwanda this year.
Yes, there is an issue about how Rwanda treats different sorts of refugees, because it has a 97% rejection rate of people who come from Middle East countries, and a much lower, which is exactly the reverse of our acceptance rate for people from the same countries, which is one of the things that worried the courts, whereas its treatment of African refugees has been singled out by the UN, so it doesn't treat everybody in the same way, which is what has been a red flag for the British courts. But it's 240 million quid and counting on the Rwanda plan, more Home Secretaries, zero asylum seekers.
But the Supreme Court didn't find an issue as to whether it's a safe country. It was whether they would be sending some refugees back to their countries where they came from. That was the issue.
So, to be fair, that's why
safety in Rwanda.
Yeah, that's why the Eye story is slightly disingenuous, because although we may have taken some refugees from Rwanda, it's about whether people would, as you say, about how Rwanda treats people from other countries.
None of us had heard before.
Refoulement.
Yeah.
Yes. And one of those concerns was that it treats people from different countries disproportionately in the views of the courts, whether that's right or wrong. I mean, the problem is that we are almost at an election, and he hasn't stopped the boats. We saw the tragedy over the weekend. I mean, I think the key things we discussed earlier is we need to sort things out with the French, because we can't keep writing them cheques and them just standing by as people...
They would say, and I don't want to be devil's advocate particularly on this issue, but they would say there's an awful lot of beach to cover.
No, there is an awful lot of beach to cover.
I mean, tens and tens of miles of beach.
Yes, but we have seen pictures of French... we saw some videos of, particularly in the summer when British holidaymakers were on some of those beaches, of filming French officials literally standing by.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got to do a deal with the French that actually works.
It is interesting. Basically, this is the 6 people who, just to be really clear about this story, because it does slightly blow your mind, who were granted asylum here rather than going to Rwandans, rather than going back to Rwanda. And at least one of them was based on sexual orientation. So the idea that perhaps this person would not be safe in Rwanda if they were gay...
But it's not illegal to be gay in Rwanda.
Well, this is what I mean. And
this has all been gone through, and that would have been raised by the Supreme Court.
This is a story, because we know that lots of people that could have been returned to their countries were granted asylum here. It's only 6 people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it's entirely plausible that in the last, 1.5 years, 6 people have slipped through the net. Many people have slipped through the net. I don't think it's just about the boats.
It's also...
People are angry about the levels of legal migration as well. We have to go back to that. Nearly, what is it?
And no politicians want to talk about that.
No one is talking about that proper. Well, none of the politicians
it was 1.2 million coming in, and then when you extrapolate the people who left, it was down to about 750 million. But 1.2 million people coming in every year is too much. It's a big city, and we haven't got the room, Matthew.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm a pro-European, and I think this is actually one of those so-called Brexit dividends. Net migration was lower when we were in the EU, and particularly what you saw is the churn, the roundabout. People came to work, they went back to Europe, rather than people bringing spouses, which is what we've seen a lot with spousal visas putting it up. So, you know, if I'd been running the Stay in the EU campaign, I'd have said you'd have lower migration under the EU, and that would have been, as history would have proved me right.
Well, talking of Brexit, is that why we can't get any of the drugs that we need,
It seems to be one of the reasons. I don't think anybody's claiming it's the only reason, but it is one of the reasons. So new figures published by the Guardian today that the number of medications that you cannot get, that are hard to get, has doubled in the last 2 years, and this is affecting a huge number of conditions. The latest is epilepsy. One of the key epilepsy drugs is now hard to get. We've already heard about ADHD, HRT, antipsychotics, etc. And it is thought that the situation is there are some supply issues across the world, but Brexit has made it particularly difficult here because we now import. Our medicines are now different from the ones that go to the whole of the EU because of regulation. So therefore, we are a smaller market.
It's all to do with packaging.
Lower purchasing value of the pound.
And lower purchasing value of the pound, and also you're at the end of the chain. So actually, some countries like Malta, for example, have had problems. Small countries are having problems importing them if you're not in that main European market, as well as the pound is crashed, and it makes them more. And they're also, the government needs to do deals with some of the drug companies about costs because we have this system of agreeing prices. So it's not the only reason, but it is a contributing factor. But it's got to be sorted out because this is something people feel when they go to the pharmacy. I was in front of the pharmacy, and somebody in front of me couldn't get their medicine the other day.
I've seen it, and I have an amazing local pharmacist, and when I go in and she shows me the list of drugs on the wall, and she says, Bev, I can't get this, and I have to pay more. I have to buy that at a higher cost than I get back from the NHS for these drugs. It's a complete mess, this. And I'm surprised people aren't talking about it more. And, of course, the situation in the Red Sea is not going to help because that's one of our main shipping lanes to bring things here. Should we talk about mice in the House of Commons? We're normally talking about rats in the House of Commons.
Oh, you nicked my joke.
I think we're all going to use that one, weren't we?
Rats sinking ship.
Rats and sinking ship. Go on, Emma.
The House of Commons employs a full-time mouse controller.
What, you mean a cat?
No, they actually employ a human person who is their mouse controller. They're spending around £100,000 on trying to control these super mice, who not only evade traps, but they're also resistant to some of the most poisonous bait you can put down. I think we've heard about the House of Commons and their filthy sewage system and their lavatory systems and all of that. It's a very old building.
It's the most disgusting workplace I've ever worked in terms of
super mice.
The facilities.
Matthew, I'm sure you've seen it, Matthew. Particularly in the House of Lords, I've had dinner there, you see a mice scurrying across the floor while you're having your dinner.
Seriously?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The building is infested with mice.
And it's right by the river, of course.
It's right by the river. The plumbing system doesn't work. I mean, the toilets are, at times, disgusting, the sort of things you'd expect, you know, on a dodgy railway station.
It's a permanent building site.
It's a permanent building site.
Everywhere.
And this is a failure. Look, it is going to... We have to decide as a country, do we want it to stand up or collapse? If we want it to collapse, that's fine. If we want it to stand up, we need to spend the money and actually get it sorted, because the longer we wait, the more it's going to cost.
But the problem is you say to the public who can't get their drugs in their pharmacy and they can't get their hip replaced, but we're going to spend £7 billion
it's really
repairing the Houses of Parliament.
Absolutely, it's really tough, but it's not... I mean, to be fair to politicians, it's not for their convenience, because it isn't. It's becoming now an unsafe workplace. You know, and we won't put up with it anywhere else.
If you move them out to fix it and put them in a purpose-built building, they'll never go back.
And which government would want to be the person? So each one kicks it into the long grass, don't they?
Labour's going to move the House of Lords outside of London, so that will...
where are you sending them?
It depends where the speech is being given. I once was in Blackpool, and we said Blackpool because
there was a time when Labour was going to close down the House of Lords because they said it was undemocratic.
I think we're going to make an elected Senate and put it outside of London. Democracy and devolution together.
Won't do anything of the sort.
That's the policy. That's the policy. That is now the official policy. But literally, we were writing a speech in Blackpool, and we said, what are you going to announce? I said, why don't we move the House of Lords to Blackpool? So we did for for that day.
Just like that.
That was just like that.
But where could you move it to?
So York is one of the big contenders, although property prices are very expensive in York. But it's a sort of ancient seat of government. You cynic, you, Andrew.
It's not going to happen.
I couldn't possibly comment.
It would be a very good way of getting rid of lots of those.
I think it's
but then
very
you could put the Commons in the Lords Chamber and do one at a time, so it would solve that problem.
Particularly the ones who are in their 90s.
I think it's a very interesting proposition.
Lord
Right. Matthew Larser, Emma Wolf, thank you so much. That is it from me and Andrew this morning. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Emily and Tom. See you tomorrow.
See you then.
I like that discussion about where Parliament should be. It used to move around from city to city back in the days of de Montfort. But coming up on this show, we've got an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister ahead of those crucial debates and votes on amendments to the Rwanda bill. What might he say?
Yes, and a new report into grooming gang scandal in Rochdale will have the very latest.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Brace yourselves for the chill when you step outside this morning. This plunge of cold Arctic air is now well and truly across all areas of the UK. It is a very frosty start to the new working week. There will be some icy stretches around as well, so do take care when you are travelling first thing. If it's snow you're after, though, you'll need to be in a region that's exposed to the northerly winds. So northern Scotland seeing some snow showers, Northern Ireland, maybe some sleet showers for parts of West Wales, southwest England, and some just skirting parts of East Yorkshire down into Norfolk as well. But further inland, it will be dry with plenty amounts of sunshine, but still very cold despite that sunshine. And the frost will quickly return once the sun goes down this evening. Another very cold night on the cards right across the board. A slight change in wind direction to a northwesterly could allow some snow showers to push further inland across northwest England, parts of Wales as we head into the early hours of Tuesday morning. But for everyone, those temperatures well and truly sub-freezing to kick off the day. As we move throughout Tuesday, we do need to keep an eye on this feature moving in from the northwest. There's still some uncertainty in regards to the exact track of it, but it could provide more snow for parts of Scotland, maybe into the Pennine districts as well, high ground areas of Northern Ireland also. Further towards central southern areas of England, it will stay drier with sunshine, hazier skies though in the far southwest. Temperatures again only seeing highs of 1 to 5 degrees Celsius, and that cold theme continues right throughout the week. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon.